Hello, bases. We're going to start talking about the Lydian hand shape. In general, we're going to be doing a little bit of half position into first position movement at the beginning. So it's really important to understand where your first finger is. Is it on the E flat? Is it on an E or an A? Is it a low one or a regular one? There's also some shifting, a little bit of shifting at the end and a pivot halfway through this scale. So there's going to be a move from half position into first position with a pivot and then a shift in the scale. And then, our thirds is it's actually easier, I think, than the major one. It happens under your hand with a pivot. And then we have our paired move like we've had in the rest of them. So again, just like the other videos, we're going to take you through the scalar portion. I'm going to give you some things that I think you want to focus on to practice and make sure you're getting this concept down in the scale. We're going to pause, allow you guys to practice for a little while. We'll come back. We'll kind of talk through the scale in thirds. I'll give you guys some things to focus on, some things to practice. You're going to pause, take some time on your own, practice the scales in third, and then we'll come back and we'll run through the whole entire thing with half notes. So the first thing I want to start off with is that you're in an E flat and you're in a half position. We know we're in half position because we want to make sure that we're playing this F natural with our fourth finger. So that's what's different about that than a pivot. If we were to pivot, we play 1 to 2, but we want to make sure we bring our fourth finger back up, our thumb back into first position. So let's start in this half position where, this is a first position. We move everything back a half step. And at that point, our first finger is on E flat and our fourth finger is on F. So the first two notes are here. We're going to use our open string G to move back into first position. So take a second, and when you practice this, you're going to want to practice moving from half position into first position. And you can just do that by working through that. Always use your open strings anytime you can to help cover a shift. It gives you an entire new beat or an entire note of however long it is in order to make that movement. So find places like that where you can use an open string to find your shift. Okay, so that's the first three notes. The second three notes, we're going to have a pivot. The pivot is going to come through, sorry about that. The pivot is going to come through going from A, B flat, and then we pivot to C. So this A, B flat, pivot. So let's practice that. So we're in first position with a pivot. A, B flat, C natural. That's how that section is going to get worked out. Okay. After this, we're going to go ahead and shift up our first finger on D and then E. So the rundown of that entire scale is you're in half position, 1-4. Use the open string to move into first position with first finger on A. A, B, C happens under a pivot. A, pivot, B, C happens under a pivot. Shift up for D on first finger and E. Take a second and practice practice the chunk where you move from half to first. And make sure you're getting that half step movement. Then practice the pivot. Practice that pivot. Now practice the shift. Making sure that you're coming from a pivot when you go back. And practice each one of those chunks separately and then put them together. So pause and practice that section on your own. All right, we are back. Part of the reason why we want to make sure we're staying in position here in this half position is for this third section. So when we play this, we're going to need to think about it in half position for a little while until you get to this open G. And that's when you utilize this G to move back into first position with second finger here, first finger here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with that first chunk. How it would look is you're in half position. You're going to end up playing the F natural and the A natural over here in half position. So the whole half position, this is from the E flat to that open G. And use that open G to move into position. Okay, so that's all in half position. So when you're practicing this section, you're going to practice the half position so that you're in this and you practice using that second finger for A. So now we're starting on that G. We're in our first position, and if you remember the pivot from earlier, A, B, C, we're going to do a similar pattern. Second finger on B, A with first finger, pivot to the F natural. So that pivot's going to look like this. B flat, A, pivot, C. So you'll want to practice that on its own. Just so you get comfortable. And then what I would suggest is getting into this, is being in half position with your A. Use this. So did you notice how I went from half position A into first position? Then then practice that with the pivot. Just so you get a feel for going from half position to first position, adding the pivot. So practice that section. The next section is what we've been doing before, where we shift. So our fourth finger is on the note we're going to play, and our first finger is the finger under your hand is already prepped for the next note, and then you play that note, and then you shift. So we're starting here on this C, where we have pivoted, but now we're not going to pivot back for 2 like this one. We're going to be in position. So we're starting on that C and walking through this whole chunk. We're starting C here with fourth finger, and our first finger is already on B flat. Now we shift for our fourth finger to be on D. Our first finger is already on C. Now we shift for our fourth finger to be on E, and our first finger is already ready for that A on the D string. So that whole section, starting from this C, starting from right there all the way through, looks like this. We're pivoted up, C, B flat under 1, pivot, shift, B, C's under 1, shift, and now our A is under 1. So when you practice this, when we pause, I want you to practice the first section where you're in half position doing the scale, because you want to practice getting used to playing A on the second finger. So practice that for a little while. Then you're going to want to practice going from that into first position. So practice the A, G, B flat, A, G, B flat, 2, O, 2, 2, O, 2. Practice that movement. Then you're going to practice the pivot. So B flat, A, C, B flat, A, C, 2, 1, 4. And then you're going to practice the shifting up. C, B flat, D, C, E, A. So it's 4, 1, shift, 4, 1, shift, 4, 1, open. So take some time and practice each of those stages on your own. Pause your video. All right, we're going to go ahead and run this whole thing in half notes. Remember, beginning you're starting in half position, then we move into first position with the pivot, and then we shift. When we get into the thirds, we're in half position all the way until we get to the G, then first position with a pivot, then we step down, shift, and we're in position. And I'll try to call through as we go. Here's half position, 1, 2, ready, go. 2. Remember second finger. Sorry, first finger. Then pivot. Now back to half position. Now second finger. Shift into first position. Here comes that pivot. Pivot. Step down. Shift. Step down. Shift. First finger A. So again, utilize this video however you need. Rewind, rewatch, pause, repeat the whole thing if you need to, or little chunks over and over until you understand how we move through this, and take it nice and slow. Think about it in smaller chunks as you practice. That's the Lydian handshake.